Hi everyone, I'm Francesca Luciano and welcome to Il Granello. In this podcast, I invite the people that inspire me for them to share their time telling us their stories, projects, and successes. My belief that every encounter in life is like a grain of salt, a granello that makes us better, that makes us who we are. I am glad to present you today the new version of the podcast Il Granello Green, which focuses on sustainability and climate action. Because it's time to act for our planet and look at those experts who can give us the tools, tips, and good practices to be more conscious, active, and engaged in our lives. To start, I went to see Clare Farrel, co founder of the nonviolent civil disobedience movement Extinction Rebellion. I met Claire at the Black Elephant launch event in Sciences Po, and I couldn't wait to further discuss with her. So that's what I did. From Paris to London, please enjoy my conversation with Claire. Hi Claire, thank you so much for taking part to Granello. And to start, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm used to be a fashion designer, and I still do some kind of educating stuff in art schools. So I guess I sort of list myself as an educator, but I'm also an activist, and sometimes I prefer the term active citizen.
And you're also one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion, XR, as you call it. Can you please explain what's that all about?
Yeah, Extinction Rebellion is a well, some people would call it a social movement. When we launched, I would have called it an open rebellion against the state. I guess it's kind of become a social movement. But in any case, we set it up to advocate for and encourage mass participation in non-violent civil disobedience, and with a view to get systemic political change in order that we might address the climate and ecological crisis.
Great. We'll get to talk about it more in detail later on. But before, I wonder, how did you get there? What's your story and what brought you to dedicate your life to climate action?
My personal journey, I guess, began when I was at school and learning about the ozone layer crisis and the CFC crisis, and being really interested in science. That was definitely, looking back, like the place where I started to go, like, what are the grown-ups doing? How can you know that and not act? How can you not arrange business and politics in line with, like, what we know about reality? And through my interest in science and into art school and studying fashion, I ended up running several small brands and working in kind of ethics and sustainability and lecturing on sustainability in fashion, and doing various bits of creative activism and also a lot of commercial work and different sectors. But really, it's clear to anybody, I would think, who has tried to engage with the sustainability agenda, that in the current paradigm, it can't do any of the good that it claims to want to do. And because as Greta Thunberg rightfully said, the rules of the game have to change. You can't have businesses that are built on you know a need for perpetual growth, an economy that's built on solely the concept of exponential perpetual growth, to address matters of where your environmental impact is ravaging the earth, where the social impact is destroying the lives of people. And so, with all of that sort of in mind and that lived experience of trying to do the right thing and knowing that it's not making a tiny bit of fucking difference, basically. And I would also add, you're either in this kind of work, I was either working very small scale, doing something that was like definitely really wholeheartedly good, but wasn't like a drop in the ocean, or I was doing something where I was trying to get a bigger thing to move, but you just don't have any power and you can't get the bigger changes to happen in the places where it will have an effect at scale. So talk sort of caught flip flopping between those two spaces looking for a place to make a difference. And knowing that the only bit where I really made a difference was in education, actually. That was the only bit where I knew I definitely made a real, tangible, useful difference that was at scale, because those people were at the start of their careers, or, you know. Um, and then I met this guy called Roger in 2017, and he was studying how to do radical and effective campaign strategy design. And we started doing some air pollution campaigning together and testing out different civil disobedience tactics. And then about 6 months later, I was arrested, I think 4 times in a week, um, testing something out, with a view to potentially end up in prison, although I wasn't imprisoned, um, on remand. And then we did a hunger strike campaign where I went on hunger strike for 2 weeks. And at the same time, we were sort of working on this plan to launch this new project. And we were coming up, I was forming the art department for it. So we did the name and the identity, the look and feel of everything. And then in October of 2018, we launched Extinction Rebellion. So that's kind of um, a short version of event.
Of a big project, I guess. And so when you started, how many were you?
About 10, I'd say.
Okay.
There's always a fluctuating number of people who are co-founders of XR. And what happened was, because of Roger's research, and he'd been talking to some people in the press, when we started to launch, he was getting press coverage. And all the media was saying the founder of Extinction Rebellion is Roger Hallam. And we kind of got together and had a bit of a meeting about it to say, it's not great if it looks like this movement has been fully just founded by one old white dude who, much as I love him, just it's not a very good look, aside from anything. But it's also the way that young people and women, the way that people get written out of history, basically, is by everything being sort of like recognized as being the result of one great man who talks to everyone a lot. And so we agreed that, like, the core coordinators would put our names down all as co-founders, so that we would sort of deal with the problem in one idea. But I guess, out of the founding members, there's also like an enormous number of people who did foundational work with us at that time, who also helped to found the movement. So it definitely didn't spring just from 10 people.
Of course. And what was the first action that kicked off XR?
Well, the first thing we did of any note was to occupy Greenpeace. And when we said we were going to do that, lots of people said, "Oh, you can't do that because everyone will think you're a wanker," or everyone will go, "Well, who do you think you are?" You know. And we did it anyway, with like flowers and stuff and love letters, and we had a big meeting with them, and we were basically trying to get them to support what we were suggesting was the sort of the necessary direction of travel, which was mass participation. So they still do direct action. They seemed like the most aligned with us out of all of the sort of big environmental groups. But they tend to do these targeted actions with a very small number of people. And we went to them saying, we think the future has to be mass. We need big numbers. This is a catastrophe, and nobody's talking like it, and nobody's acting like it. And a bunch of the people that I met through that meeting were like, yeah, we know, and it's really difficult. And we had a wonderful conversation with them, and it was really, some of the people that I met that day are, I would say, still my allies, and I still talk to them. It wasn't a majorly hostile kind of affair, but that said, it also didn't work because they didn't come on board and do what we were inviting them to do as an organization. I don't know why. And then anyway, after that was a kind of like, well, I guess it was a bit of a sort of moment that we created, but it wasn't mass media. You know what I mean? It was sort of a lot of people in that space heard about it. A lot of people in the charity sector knew what happened because it was a funny story and stuff. But um, I guess then we closed down 5 bridges all at once in central London, all on the same day for like the most of the day on a Saturday. And we had a series of kind of direct actions, including at like different government departments where people spray painted and got arrested and glued onto doors and blocked entrances and did all sorts of stuff like that. And all of that kind of led towards a funeral procession where we tried to bury a coffin on Parliament Square. Lots of people got the police piled in because we were trying to dig a big hole in the grass outside Parliament and bury this big coffin. And that all kind of preceded the April 2019 kind of bigger rebellion. By that time, the movement had sort of swelled to some bigger numbers, and we closed down. So Waterloo Bridge, Oxford Circus, Marble Arch, which is a very large junction, and Parliament Square.
Not exactly unknown places, I'd say.
Extremely iconic parts of London.
Yeah. And so you close bridges, but how does it actually work? How do you block a city like London? And also, what were you aiming for? Was it to shock people, to create disorder, a civil disobedience action through non-violence?
Well, to me, the practice of non-violence is a form of conflict. So I think some people think that when you say non-violence, you mean pacifism. And for me, non-violence is a means of generating social confrontation with the design principles that say, you aim for nobody to be hurt, but of course you have to disrupt something in order for it to create some space. And so we talked a lot in the early days about the way that good nonviolent actions create a dilemma. So, so if you imagine, sitting on a bridge in protest and turning it into a different type of space, which included on Waterloo Bridge, we put, I think, more than 40 trees, which were handballed onto the bridge. There was a skate ramp. There was a truck with sound system that was a stage inside. So you pulled the curtain back on the side and you have a stage. And no, so you also, by what you take into that place, we transformed those locations, if you see what I mean, into something else other than what we normally would think as Londoners that they are. One of the basic principles that we were considering at the time was like, well, either the police move in to arrest you, and hopefully because of the universal cause, because it's very important, because you're peaceful, because you're family friendly, because you're approachable, because you're doing it in a certain way, and it's hopefully felt to be respectful. Either the police look bad for arresting nice, good people, or they don't arrest people and then they leave you there, and then you get to stay there and do the thing that you're trying to do, which is to take up public space and communicate more broadly with the public. I think the other thing for me about nonviolence is that it creates space for dialogue. So, like before people sit on a bridge, no one's talking about climate change. When you sit on the bridge, lots of people talk about why you're sitting on the bridge. Therefore, they end up talking about climate change. So, the disruptive element is a necessary part of kind of creating some new space where you can have a conversation which wasn't possible before.
With the goal of awakening as many people as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting right now because people are saying, well, the alarm has been raised. People talk very openly now that there's a really serious climate crisis and that it is time sensitive and that it is a catastrophe that's unfolding. So in a way, the generation of that conversation has been extremely successful in the last few years by the climate movement. What has been less successful is, the activation of real change, particularly real solid political or systemic change, that's actually needed.
Yeah, so that was actually my next question. So after almost 5 years of XR, what are the biggest achievements? And did you get some tangible results, or is there still a long way to go?
Well, there's been quite a few things that you could say are a real success by XR, and then there's a load of things that you could say we've like totally not succeeded at.
Mm.
um, and I don't know, I can't give you a definitive list, but one thing that was quick to change was the quality of public conversation. And I do think that we helped with that far more quickly than I was expecting. So, we launched the movement really at the sort of autumn of 2018. And by the COP conference in 2019, Extinction Rebellion was named the number one global influencer on climate. So that was in less than a year and a half. And so that's quite a big success. It was designed to be something that you could give away all of the assets for. So the way that we made the design program, the way that we explained to people how we did actions. It was quite easy for people to pick up and like run with in other places. So people quite quickly wanted to do the same or similar things in other parts of the world. So we also had a very, very rapid expansion. Um, and a lot of that was down to like the design of the way that we'd set things up. Because you could set something like that up with a membership list and where people have to be approved and where you have to track who's part of it and all of that. But we designed it to be decentralized, and so you give away a lot of your assets really quickly, and that allowed it to expand really fast. So, that was also successful, I guess, in its own way. And I think we were in like over 100 countries in less than 2 years. So that also moved pretty fast. And I think in 2019 we saw a declaration in the UK Parliament of a climate and ecological emergency. And following that, more than 50%, I think, of UK councils have declared an emergency. So, some of those campaigns already existed to try and get councils to do that declaration. But I think Extinction Rebellion really helped to turbocharge that effort. So it helped to push a lot of those over the line. And then, of course, Theresa May made the UK the first country to have an official net zero date, which is legally binding, which, of course, I think is totally shit because it's 2050. But that also started a ripple of other cities and nation states around the world doing the same. So I definitely think we had a really positive impact on all that stuff. It's important to note, though, that I think the other thing that helped with all of that was the school strike movement. And I don't think on its own, Extinction Rebellion would have been nearly as effective as it was because it was exploding at precisely the same time. It's an extremely compelling thing to run parallel to what we were doing because we were sort of somebody said to me the other day, you were like the angry adults that were going out and saying we're not going to let this pass. And then there was the young people who were saying, like, I have an argument that you can't beat a young person on an argument on climate. It was an amazing combination of forces.
The perfect timing, yeah, to start the revolution. It was the moment when all these forces jumped out. But to me, the hardest part now is to keep the momentum and in the end to transform these actions into something even more concrete. And so I've seen on the Extinction Rebellion website that you are organizing the big one on the 21st of April. Can you tell me a bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So we've been trying to mobilize people to come and draw attention to the failings and corruption of our political system, I guess. This time, we've gone back to the NGOs to say, hey guys, do you want to come now? Because I appreciate that a lot of people who work in that sector probably have come to various things that we've done in the past. But organizationally, we've never had large scale NGOs all emailing their membership and saying, let's pull this movement of movements together. And it feels like lots of people in the space are saying, well, we need a bigger movement, and at the time when the school strikes were happening, it was very apparent to me that the scale of that was one of its strengths, millions of children, millions and millions all over the world. And in our country, at least, we've got at the moment, people very angry about undignified workers' rights situations, people who really, really badly need a pay rise. People in this country have not seen a real time. Their wages have stagnated or gone down since 2005. Someone told me the other day. Everybody is struggling with all sorts of issues in our society, and the direction of blame and criticism all points in one direction, and that is to House of Westminster. And so, XR always had a suggestion for a systemic overhaul of the way that we run politics, which includes loads of ordinary people in deliberative political processes. And that's what we've always been advocating for, because we think ordinary, everyday people, when you get them together and ask them about the most difficult things that are facing society, they are more bold than politicians, because they don't need to win elections. So they can say what really needs to be said. And they're like experts in everyday life, which our politicians are not. They don't know, lots of them don't have, they're completely unhinged from reality. They go to Eton school, then they go to Oxford or Cambridge University, then they walk into a job in politics, then they go to Westminster. And, we had a scandal a couple of years ago where, one of the MPs got asked how much was a pint of milk and he didn't know. And so, this is it's like a really, it's a really reasonable and obvious suggestion that when politics is failing so many people so badly, you would sort of upgrade it, to something that's more democratic. And we think more ordinary people involved in politics would improve democracy no end. And at the moment, democracy all over the world is in a state of decline, which is very frightening, and particularly here. So we're hoping to call all these causes together to show actually there's different ways of making decisions, and if we try them out, we might find that we might make much better decisions. And certainly we might decide as a society that we don't want to open new oil and gas fields in the North Sea, because, the majority of people are not interested in self-terminating this civilization, which is the course that we are clearly on.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully that will work. And on your personal level, what is the craziest thing that you've done to protest?
Well, going on hunger strike is quite full on, and makes a lot of people sort of go, "Oh, are you okay? Have you got mental health problems? Should I be worried about you?" So that was quite an intense thing to do, which I did in 2018. But probably going and breaking the windows of a bank is the most dramatic direct action that I've done. And I'm still awaiting trial for that, which will happen later this year. So I may or may not face a prison sentence, or, some fairly serious personal impacts from that.
And as citizens, without being so radical, maybe, what would you suggest that people can do to have a positive impact at a global level?
I think there's a few things you can do that are quite easy. So switch your bank. That is very easy. Just stop banking with bad banks. There are better and worse banks, and you can find them. if you do a little bit of research and switch. Don't leave your money with people that are putting billions of pounds into fossil fuels. Um, you can insulate your homes if it's badly insulated. You can try to save as much energy as you can at home. Don't fly, don't drive private cars, and change the way that you eat. But apart from that, I'd say that your personal agency is far less important than your political agency at this point. So supporting activists, joining movements, showing up um, is really super important, because we really need to shift the dial on what an appropriate action looks like. And for that, we need still a lot of effort in social movement.
Great advices. And following this path, I'm now gonna ask you the Granello Green questions.
Mhm.
So, a daily action,
You used to say, like, here, put this graph on your wall, which is the loss of Arctic ice, which is showing you like how quickly it's happening. So you just don't forget that it's happening.
a material,
Well, I think people should fix things more. So I think people should definitely fix their clothes more. Fashion is one of the most polluting industries in the world, and most people throw things away when they get a small hole or when a button falls off. So maybe it's a needle and thread.
an object we should use more,
Ride a bike if you can.
a green brand to follow,
That's a really good question. I never really know what to say about this, because I'm so like done with sustainability that I can't, like, I feel like I should go, oh, follow this great fashion brand that does this thing, but I just can't do it. Um
why? Because you're fed up?
well, because I don't think it works. Like, you're you're better off just not buying anything than you are investing in sustainable stuff, in my view, because the volume is the problem. This It's good to support sustainable businesses if you have to buy something, but most people don't need to buy very much, actually. So just like my first answer would be, just like, stop fucking shopping, and like play some music, or go to a singing group or something. Like, that's the best low carbon stuff that you can do. Play a game of cards. I don't know, go for a walk, have a cuddle. There's loads of things that we actually love doing that don't need any extra energy. I sort of feel like that's where we need to look.
Cool. An instructive website,
If you want to learn about climate change, look up a person called David Spratt. I think he's wonderful. He's an Australian guy, and he's got a site called Climate Code Red, and he looks at climate change in a very useful way, and is a good communicator. He looks at this work through like more like the eyes of an insurer. So if you look at an insurance company and there's a 5% chance that a bridge will collapse, you will not build that bridge and you will not insure that bridge, because it's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous to take a chance of like total death on odds as awful as 5%. Or, like, people would say, you wouldn't get on a plane if it had a 10% chance of crashing. And so he is good at reframing the conversation away from a kind of a, a paradigm which doesn't work for ordinary people, because ordinary people aren't scientists and they're not used to thinking in those ways. He understands that you need to communicate with people in a different way. So I definitely would look up his website. And then I'd say look at extinctionrebellion.uk if you want to learn more about citizens' assemblies and find some foundational kind of research on the movement, but also on our proposed solution, which is deliberative democracy.
yeah, I love your website, and I think it's really bold. It really reflects your approach and ambition. A movie,
Movie, I always tell our students to watch a film called The True Cost, because it helps you to see what's behind the fashion industry in a way which has breadth. It helps you to think about the economics, the business models, the social conditions, the environmental impacts. It's sort of all kind of in there. So that's a very, I'd say that's a very useful film. But in terms of Extinction Rebellion and climate and thinking about to change things, um, there are loads of really good films out there about previous kind of struggles, if you like. And I really recommend that you look at the history of social movements. So, there are films about the civil rights movement. Um, Harder to find films about the suffragettes and the suffrage movement. I think there might be a website called something like Films for Action. If you look up films that are about like previous social movements, it's really an easy way to like learn some of the social movement history, which is very valuable.
A book.
We made a book. This is not a drill, which would give you like an overview of the roots of Extinction Rebellion and some of the initial thinking. It also has a kind of global context there, but it also has some theory on like why we built the movement the way we did. Um, so I guess it feels a bit cheesy, but I would strongly recommend that. Um, the other thing to look at might be one of the other texts that inspired us, like a book called "This Is an Uprising," which is about some of the theories about social uprisings.
And to conclude, a motto.
I've always liked this quote from an English academic writer, Theodore Zeldin, who says something like, "For all the times in history when violence was avoided, curiosity won." If we could be more curious about each other and the world and replace the violence in our systems with thoughtfulness and curiosity, then I think that would be an excellent thing.
Nice. That's exactly what a Granello Green is all about. Thank you so much, Claire.
Thanks. See you soon.